Welcome. My name is Adrian Hale, and this is my confession. I'll never forget the humiliation of that morning. The irony is, I wasn't even the one who walked out. It was her. Another flawless woman, another runway smile, another name that barely lingered in my head. She stormed out of my penthouse with her designer suitcase dragging like a wounded soldier, shouting something about me being incapable of love. Maybe she was right. I didn't chase her. I never chase. But she left me with a problem, and my family was the reason it mattered. My brother's wedding was in 2 days. A gala, a parade, a performance where appearances were everything. Every time I showed up at family events, I was expected to bring arm candy, the kind of women who looked good in photos but disappeared from my life before the flowers wilted. And this time, for the first time, I had no one. I could already imagine my mother's raised eyebrow, my father's cold silence, the cousin's snickers. Asterisk the mighty Adrian Hale, billionaire, can't even keep a date for his brother's big day? Asterisk the thought burned worse than whiskey on an empty stomach. I couldn't allow it. Not in front of him. Not in front of him? The golden son, the perfect groom, the brother who never stumbled. That was how I ended up staring at the plain wooden desk outside my office, where she sat. Emily, my secretary. The least remarkable woman in the building. Glasses too big for her face, hair pulled into a knot so severe it looked painful, suits 2 sizes too loose. Efficient, invisible, forgettable. That was exactly why I had hired her. She wasn't a distraction. She wasn't competition. She was safe. "Emily," I said, leaning against her desk. She looked up with those calm gray eyes of hers, waiting. Not flustered, not fawning, just waiting. Always steady. "Clear your schedule for the weekend. You're coming with me." Her brows lifted, and for the first time in months, I saw something spark in her gaze. "To where, sir?" "My brother's wedding." I said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I need a date." "You'll do." I half expected her to protest, to stammer, to blush. But she didn't. She just adjusted her glasses, typed something quickly on her keyboard, and said, "Very well. Should I arrange the travel details?" Her composure irritated me. It was supposed to be a favor, a stroke of fortune for her, a chance to step into a world far above her own. But she treated it like just another item on my calendar, like confirming a board meeting or booking a flight. For a moment, I wondered if she had any idea how this would look. My family was going to devour her alive. I wasn't about to let her show up in one of those shapeless suits, though. That would have been suicide. So I did something I never thought I'd waste time on. I told her to meet me at Madison and Row, the most exclusive boutique in the city. When she arrived, she clutched her modest handbag like it was armor. The sales assistants glanced at her, dismissive at first, until they saw me. Then the red carpet rolled out. "Dress her," I told them. "Something appropriate for a Hale wedding." They swarmed her with silk, sequins, and whispers. I sat back in the velvet chair, scrolling through my phone, pretending not to care. But when she stepped out of the fitting room, the phone nearly slipped from my hand. Gone was the gray shadow I knew. Emily stood in front of me in a dress the color of midnight, her hair loosened into soft waves, her eyes suddenly sharp as stormlight behind the discarded glasses. The fabric clung where it should, flowed where it had to, transforming her into something I couldn't dismiss as ordinary. For the first time in years, I was speechless. She tilted her head, testing my reaction with quiet amusement. "Will this do?" My throat was dry. "It'll do." The words came out rougher than I intended. Later that night, I poured myself a drink in front of the city skyline and tried to convince myself this was still just strategy. Better to arrive with someone, anyone, than to face their judgment alone. She was a shield, nothing more. No drama, no scenes, no emotions. Just silence. At least, that was what I thought. Because I had no idea then, that she wasn't silent at all. She was music waiting for the right moment to play. And I, blind in my arrogance, was about to drag her into the fire where every mask burns away. The drive to the estate felt like a deposition. I gave Emily instructions the way a man gives himself excuses. Minimal conversation. Smile when spoken to. If my mother asks where you're from, say the city. If my father asks what you do, say I keep Adrian's calendar from burning down. Nothing more. She didn't bristle. She didn't bow. She just watched the highway unspool, fingers resting on the clasp of her modest garment bag. Understood, she said. Neutral. A weather report. Hale Ridge rose out of the trees, all white columns and old money. The gravel announced us like a drum roll. On the steps stood the chorus, my mother, immaculate and armed with judgment, my father, jaw set to patriarch, my brother Lucas, the beloved groom, cousins dressed like ambition. I felt 12 again, except instead of acne, I had a net worth and the same desire to disappear. Mother's smile froze when she registered Emily. It was quick, a stutter in the face, then recovery. Adrian, she sang, cheek to cheek, perfume like a curated memory. Her gaze slid to Emily, and performed a quick autopsy. And you must be? Emily, she answered for herself. Not miss, not dear. Just Emily? She offered her hand. Mother hesitated half a beat too long before taking it. The cousins didn't bother hiding their glances. One of them, Nolan, the kind of relative who lists his CrossFit PRs on Christmas cards, smirked. Brother, you've simplified. I felt the first prick of heat. Emily keeps my life functional, I said. Be grateful people like her exist, or we drown in your emails. Father's eyes flicked over her, then away. Dinner in an hour. Don't be late. His welcome, carved in stone. Inside, the house hummed. Florists invaded the foyer, a string quartet tuned in the sunroom, and somewhere a wedding planner muttered into a headset like a battlefield surgeon. Emily kept close, but not clinging, absorbing the chaos with a calm that irritated me because it suggested she'd seen worse. We were funneled into a pre-dinner family gauntlet. Names, embraces, assessments. My sister Abby leaned in, her voice a sugar blade. She's quaint. Does she talk? Sometimes she plays dead, I said. It's how she survives board meetings. Abby laughed for the crowd. Emily didn't. She was studying a corner of the room, where an old baby grin sat half forgotten beneath peonies. Her fingers twitched once, barely there, like a muscle memory tugged a string. Lucas appeared, all good intentions in a tailored suit. He hugged me, clapped my shoulder, then turned to Emily with actual human eyes. Welcome, he said. I'm sorry about the noise. We're one florist away from civil war. Congratulations, she said. It's beautiful. He grinned like he believed her. You two sit near us tonight, all right? Then to me, a softer aside. You good? Perfect. I lied. Perfection was the family sport. Seating was a blood sport disguised as etiquette. Mother placed Emily between Abby and Nolan. Strategic containment. I took the seat across, bracing. The conversation attacked in polite volleys. So, Emily, where do you shop? Abby asked, eyes cataloging the off-the-rack suit. Anywhere that sells clocks, Emily said without missing a beat. Time is my only luxury. It landed. A few chuckles. Abby blinked, recalibrating. Nolan tried next. What's it like, living in Adrian's shadow? She lifted her water glass. There are worse shadows, she said. Some people cast none at all. My fork paused midair. That was not nothing. The table pricked up like a hunting dog. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt watched, as if she'd tossed a line over me without effort. The quartet in the next room faltered through a cadence and stopped. A planter darted past, pale. The pianist delayed. She whispered to a server. We'll have dead air until the toast. I saw Emily hear it. A tiny tilt of the head, and almost smile. The old baby grand was angled so I could see the yellowed keys. I thought she might stand. She didn't. Not yet. Father cleared his throat for silence. He launched into a speech about legacy that sounded suspiciously like a quarterly report. I watched Emily out of the corner of my eye. She sat still, but the stillness wasn't emptiness. It was coiled, like the moment before a bow finds the string. Dessert arrived with a kind of restraint that insults appetite. Conversations broke into smaller fires. Abby returned to the attack, sugar reloaded. Emily dear, do you dance? Or is that not your thing? I follow well, she said. The trick is choosing who not to follow. Someone whistled softly. Even Mother's mouth twitched, unwilling amusement. I felt the heat again, different this time. Protective, unfamiliar. I didn't want them to break her. Worse, I didn't want her to see how long I'd let them break me. After coffee, people drifted. The quartet remained MIA. The room emptied into murmurs and clinking glass. Emily stood, smoothing her skirt. Excuse me, she said to no one and everyone, then walked toward the corner with the baby grand. I almost told her to sit. To be safe. To stay small for one more hour, so the wolves would yawn and move on. But the words died behind my teeth. She lifted the fallboard with a care bordering on reverence and laid her fingers on the keys like a promise. No one noticed at first. Then she played the softest ripple of notes, and the room turned its head as one. I had the strangest sensation that something in me, sealed and labeled "Do Not Open" since childhood, had just cracked its lid. Applause broke out when her fingers left the keys, hesitant at first, then swelling like a tide that no one could resist. My mother actually clapped. My father's lips moved, the beginnings of a smile, almost unthinkable. I sat rooted in my chair, trying to assemble the fragments of what I'd just seen. Emily, my secretary, the woman I'd never looked at twice, had turned a brutal dinner into a celebration. And she had done it without asking for permission. She slid off the piano bench, cheeks flushed not with embarrassment but with life. Children rushed her first. My nieces tugged her hands, begging for another song, another game. Emily knelt, her dress pooling like midnight silk around her, and whispered something that sent them squealing with delight. Within minutes, she was on the floor with them, stacking napkins into castles, and laughing like she had all the time in the world. I felt my chest tighten. No one in this house ever laughed without restraint. Not me, not my siblings, not even Lucas with all his charm. We smiled for photographs, we chuckled politely for donors. But laughter, the reckless, unguarded kind, was rare. And now it was spilling across the floor because of her. Abby leaned over, her tone clipped. Where did you find her, Adrian? She's not what I expected. I forced a sip of wine to cover my hesitation. Neither did I. Nolan muttered. She's playing the room like a violin. Careful, cousin. Maybe she's smarter than she looks. For once, I didn't have a retort, because the thought had already crossed my mind. The evening carried on, but differently. Emily danced with my uncle, an old man whose knees usually buckled at the thought of standing. He laughed as she guided him gently across the floor. She teased the chef about the overcooked lamb, earning a roar of approval from the kitchen. She told a joke at the expense of a pompous cousin, and instead of offense, he grinned and poured her more champagne. And then she was dancing again, this time with Lucas. My brother, the saint, the favorite. I watched his hand on her back, the two of them spinning under the chandelier, and something inside me twisted hard. Not anger, not jealousy, something worse. A hollow ache I didn't have a name for. I left the table, stepping out into the night air. The gardens were strung with fairy lights, glowing against the dark. I dragged in a breath of cold air, trying to clear the static in my head. She wasn't supposed to matter. She was supposed to be invisible, a placeholder, a shadow. Instead, she had walked into this house and set it on fire, and everyone was warming their hands by it. I didn't hear her approach until she was beside me. "Too loud in there?" she asked, her voice softer now, stripped of performance. I turned. She looked different in the night. Less goddess, less spectacle. Just Emily, eyes bright, hair falling loose, a woman who had somehow turned my family into her audience. "You've made quite an impression," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. She tilted her head, considering me. "Wasn't that the point?" The answer hit harder than it should have. Because I realized then she hadn't come here to save me. She hadn't come here to hide behind me. She'd come here to show me something I'd forgotten how to see. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I wanted to leave this fire. The next morning arrived too quickly, sunlight creeping through the curtains of the guest room I'd been assigned. I hadn't slept well. My dreams were cluttered with piano notes, and the sound of Emily's laughter echoing through halls where laughter didn't belong. At breakfast, the battlefield resumed. The long oak table groaned under silver trays of fruit and pastries, but the real feast was gossip. My mother's voice was smooth but sharp. "Emily, dear, I had no idea you played. Where did you study?" Emily buttered her toast like the question carried no weight. "Nowhere. My grandmother taught me when I was little." "Self-taught?" Mother arched a brow. "Impressive." The word sounded more like asterisk suspicious. Asterisk. Nolan smirked. "Maybe we should keep her around, cousin. She's better entertainment than half the people you paraded through here." My jaw tightened. I wanted to snap, but Emily beat me to it. Entertainment is cheap. Music is memory. People remember how you make them feel, not how much you cost. The silence that followed was almost violent. Even Father set down his coffee cup. Abby's eyes flickered with something I couldn't name, envy maybe. Lucas grinned outright. "She's right. Yesterday felt alive for once." Mother changed the subject quickly, but I caught the flicker of unease in her eyes. Emily wasn't playing their game. She was rewriting it. After breakfast, guests scattered across the estate. Golf for the men, spa for the women, rehearsals for the ceremony. I found Emily in the garden, sitting on a stone bench with one of my nieces on her lap, patiently braiding the child's hair. Her dress was simple now, pale blue against the greenery, but she looked no less striking. "You're causing chaos," I said, leaning against the marble railing. She looked up at me, squinting in the sunlight. "Chaos? I thought it was called asterisk fitting in." "Asterisk. That's not what you're doing." My voice was sharper than intended. "You're outshining everyone." Her hands kept moving, weaving the braid. If they're threatened by kindness and a little music, that says more about them than me. The child hopped off her lap, hair swinging, and ran off. Emily patted the bench beside her. I sat reluctantly. For a moment, it felt absurdly normal, like we weren't surrounded by judgment and secrets. "You don't have to protect me, Adrian," she said quietly. I knew exactly what I was walking into. That stung. Because the truth was, I hadn't thought of protecting her at all. I'd only thought of myself, my image, my pride, my family's opinion. And yet here she was, steady where I was unraveling. Before I could answer, Lucas appeared on the path, tuxedo jacket over his shoulder. "Adrian, rehearsal in 10. Emily, would you mind helping with the programs? You seem to have a better head for this than half the staff." She agreed with an easy smile. Lucas looked between us, his expression unreadable, then disappeared toward the chapel. I watched her stand, smooth her dress, and walk away, sunlight catching in her hair. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about money, or appearances, or legacy. I was thinking about her, and how terrifying it felt that she might walk out of my life just as easily as she had walked into it. The rehearsal should have been a formality, but nothing in my family ever was. The chapel glowed with stained glass and money, flowers everywhere like proof of Lucas's perfection. He stood at the altar with his bride-to-be, radiant and rehearsed. I took my spot as best man, but my eyes kept straying to the back pew where Emily sat, a program in her lap, head slightly tilted as if she were studying every detail. Halfway through the vows, Abby leaned over to whisper in my ear, "She's going to make a fool of you, Adrian. You brought someone who doesn't know her place." I clenched my jaw, kept my eyes forward, and said nothing. But my silence burned. Afterward, in the courtyard, the tension sharpened. Guests milled about with champagne glasses, waiting for lunch, while my mother cornered Emily near the fountain. I arrived just in time to catch her words. "A secretary is fine in the office, but in this family? You must see how this looks." Emily's reply was calm, even gentle. "With respect, Mrs. Hale, I wasn't aware families came with dress codes." Mother's mouth pinched tight, the kind of expression that usually ended arguments. But Emily didn't flinch. She simply excused herself and went to help a group of children carry chairs for the reception, laughing as though nothing had happened. I wanted to follow, to defend her, but my father caught my arm. "Adrian," he said, voice low, "control your experiment. This is Lucas's day, not yours." Experiment? The word made my stomach twist. To them, she wasn't even real. She was a prop. A mistake. By evening, the house was glowing again, chandeliers lit, music drifting through the halls. Dinner was louder this time, the tension buried under wine and noise. Emily sat 2 seats away, radiant without trying, drawing smiles from cousins who had mocked her 24 hours earlier. She teased the children, charmed the grandparents, and even coaxed a laugh out of my father, the same man who hadn't laughed at one of my jokes in a decade. I drank more than I should have, watching it unfold. Each time someone leaned closer to her, something twisted inside me. I'd never cared before. My companions were ornaments, not people. Replaceable, forgettable. But this wasn't forgettable. She wasn't forgettable. When dessert was cleared, Lucas raised his glass for a toast. To family, and to the unexpected surprises that make life better. His eyes flicked toward Emily before returning to his bride. The room cheered. My hand stayed cold around my glass. Later, when the crowd spilled onto the dance floor, I finally cornered her near the veranda. Music pulsed inside, the air outside cool and sharp. "You handled my mother well," I said. It came out half gruff, half grateful. Emily tilted her head. "Your mother handled herself. I just didn't play along." I studied her in the low light, the curve of her smile, the way she didn't seem the least bit shaken by the storm she'd walked into. "Do you ever get nervous?" "Of course," she said. "I just don't let anyone see it." For a moment, we stood there, silence humming between us. And I realized with startling clarity, I wasn't just proud of her. I was afraid of losing her. That fear was new. And it was mine alone. The wedding day arrived wrapped in gold. Sunlight spilled over the estate, striking the windows until the whole house glowed like it knew today was the grand performance. Guests flooded the gardens, photographers swarmed the marble steps, and I moved through it all like an actor who had forgotten his lines. Because for once, I wasn't the star, not even close. Emily appeared at the top of the stairs in a gown the color of dawn, pale rose that caught fire in the light. I saw heads turn as she descended, not just the heads of strangers but of my family, the ones who had dismissed her, mocked her, underestimated her. She carried herself with such ease it felt less like she was walking into our world, and more like we were walking into hers. I had planned to offer my arm, to escort her formally, but the moment I stepped forward, 2 children rushed to her instead, begging her to sit with them. She laughed, gathered them close, and let them lead her away, leaving me standing useless in a sea of tuxedos. During the ceremony, I was supposed to watch my brother and his bride, but my eyes betrayed me. They kept drifting toward Emily, seated among the guests, her hands folded, her expression serene. When the vows were spoken, her smile was genuine, the kind that seemed to bless the moment itself. Lucas caught my gaze once, and there was no mockery in his eyes, only something like gratitude. At the reception, the transformation became complete. Emily danced with children, then with uncles, then even with the bride, spinning her across the floor until the crowd erupted in applause. She told stories that had people clutching their sides with laughter. She raised her glass during a lull and offered a toast, not rehearsed, not polished, but raw and warm. To love that lasts, to families that grow, and to the courage it takes to be truly seen. Even my father stood for that one. I should have been relieved. I had brought her here as camouflage, a shield against ridicule. Instead, she had become the heartbeat of the night. The shield had turned into a sun, and I, Adrian Hale, the man who thought he could bend the world to his image, was standing in her light. At one point, I escaped to the terrace, glass in hand, trying to quiet the storm inside me. The city lights flickered beyond the hills, and for once, I didn't feel larger than them. I felt small. Small and unsteady, because I wanted something I couldn't define. Then Emily stepped out, her gown brushing the stone floor, her hair tumbling in soft waves. She joined me without hesitation, as if she belonged there all along. "Hiding again?" she asked. "Thinking," I admitted. "Dangerous habit for a Hale," she teased. I turned to her, words stuck in my throat. What I wanted to say was too big, too raw. So instead I said, "You've changed everything." She looked at me then, not as an employee, not as a man she owed anything to, but simply as myself. And in her eyes, I saw something terrifying, possibility. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sure money, power, or control meant anything at all if she wasn't in the picture. And that realization didn't feel like weakness. It felt like the start of something I wasn't ready for, but couldn't walk away from. The reception blurred into midnight. Laughter and music spilled across the gardens, lanterns swaying like captured stars. My family, usually so cold and sharp-edged, had softened under Emily's spell. She danced, she laughed, she listened. Even the servants seemed to drift closer to her, as though she carried some secret gravity. I watched from the edge, untouchable as always, but this time it wasn't armor, it was fear. Fear that if I stepped closer, the truth of what I wanted would burn me alive. At last, when the last toast had been given and the last song had been played, I found her on the terrace, alone. She leaned against the railing, her gown rippling like liquid light, the night breeze lifting strands of her hair. The noise of the party was distant here, muffled, as if the world itself knew this moment didn't belong to anyone else. "You survived," she said softly when I approached. "Barely." I tried to make it sound light, but my voice cracked. She turned, eyes catching mine. No judgment, no mockery, just quiet knowing. "You don't have to fight so hard all the time, Adrian. You can just be." No one had ever spoken to me like that. Not my parents, not lovers, not even Lucas. Always expectations, always performance. Never permission to simply exist. "Emily," I whispered, and the name felt new, like I'd never truly spoken it before. My hand lifted almost without my consent, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't move away. Her breath caught, her lips parted just slightly, and I knew down to my bones, that everything had led here. The kiss was hesitant at first, almost a question. But then she leaned into it, and the question became an answer I'd been starving for. The world fell silent. No family, no money, no empire, just her, warm and real, breaking every wall I had built. When we finally parted, she looked at me with a smile that wasn't triumph, but invitation. "Careful," she said, voice low. "You're not the only one who can change the rules." I laughed, shaky and breathless, the sound foreign in my own mouth. "Emily, you already have." Behind us, The music swelled again, the party reclaiming the night. But I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing status or approval. I was chasing something far rarer, something I didn't even know I'd been missing until her lips found mine. And as I held her gaze, I understood the terrifying truth. I was no longer the master of this story. She was. Thanks for being here. Every story deserves someone who listens. Subscribe, because the next confession might change the way you see everything.